three.
Uh-oh. Do we need to push it back or no?
I don't know. No, hold on, because it's not going to be like this. It's still setting up. Oh no, we are live now. Okay. You come my way. There we go.
Good.
Hi everybody, how we doing tonight? Welcome back to show number 3, the Mary Show. Tonight's show is going to be a little bit of a serious topic. I have a wonderful godfather who has been through a journey. My dad and him were growing up in Queens, best friends, a lot of stories to tell. My father is now passed for quite some time now, but I get to relive the memories with my godfather. And here tonight is my godbrother, Dale. Everyone say hi to Dale.
Cheers, everyone.
So basically tonight we're going to talk about their journey. There are not a significant improvement on curing cancer, even though we have come a long way for treatment and to sustain a quality of life for people who make a choice to seek treatment. And one of the blood cancers that my godfather got diagnosed with was the Myelodysplastic Syndrome, MDS. And there's a lot of people when they get sick, they're unfamiliar, so they panic and they get scared. They don't know where to turn. And of course, all the time we're believing, of course, it's the doctor. He knows what he's talking about. But something as simple of not knowing the asymptomatic, like right now we have corona going around and people are diagnosed with corona after they take a test. And if they're positive, and they're like, how can I be positive? I feel fine. I feel great. I don't have any symptoms. So they call them asymptomatic. Well, a similar story happened with my godfather. He went for a basic wellness check, felt great. He was living his best life, going all over town, eating at the best restaurants, smoking the best cigars, drinking the best liquor, wines anyone could possibly dream about. He's definitely somebody you would want to follow and live your life through, you know, and that was the great spirit of me knowing when my dad was growing up with him, every weekend was another laugh, every day. You know, when I was growing up, my father worked very hard. He worked double shifts in the city, but every weekend we would go camping. We would always have fun, you know, and that was something that my father did. He worked hard, but he played harder. And I guess I kind of picked that up from my dad. My godfather definitely wanted me to share, you know, it is extremely important that you go for your wellness checkups. You know, at my age and probably my audience age, I'm just going to say there's no young people, I'm sure, watching my show. You know, we're scared. Nobody ever wants to go to the doctor, especially me. I've had everything under the sun. And hi, Chris. And, you know, there's certain kind of checkups. It's like when you go for a car in your car after 3,000 miles, you got to get an oil change. After 6,000, 7,000 miles, you got to get your air filter changed. And then you got to get your training done. And 20,000. Same thing with physical checkups. You know, you start off as a newborn, you get your wellness check, and then you get your 2-year-old shots and so on, right? So then when you get to a certain age, the men have to do a prostate check and women have to do other checks, you know, and then you go for your first, your colonoscopy and things. Nobody ever wants to talk about it. And I really don't want to go into detail about it. But the story I'm going to share is very real. It's very real for a lot of people. And I think us being part of humanity and helping others is not so far off like people think. You know, just like I had in my introductory show about helping your community and helping other people. There are people that are dying that could survive, but they need human help. You know, sometimes they can't get it within their family and friends and need to outsource and look for other options. So tonight we'll be educating you about the specific blood disease and the whole journey story about how one became two and two became one.
Yep.
I nailed it. All right, so this is Dale. This is my god brother. He's so handsome. And so basically, when was the first time your father had called you and spoke about what was going on?
It was just about a year and a half ago. About a year and a half ago, the idea and the word of Myelodysplastic Syndrome came into our lives. And in simplistic form, first understood it as a blood cancer, which as soon as you hear the word cancer, it's a really scary thing. First thing you do is start Googling and trying to understand what it is, how it happened, why him. A million different questions come through your head. But then it's also then the balance of trying to understand what he's also been going through at that time, because the word cancer is a scary, scary word when it enters into any family.
Yes.
And at first, yeah, it was really a learning process of baby steps to really understand what this disease is and what this form of cancer does and can do. And it was first explained to me by the doctors as what they call pre-leukemia. A lot of people understand what leukemia is and at least understand that it's a blood disease or a blood cancer that affects millions of people. It's indiscriminate to age, whether it be infant leukemia on up to seniors and everybody in between.
And let me just stop you there for a second, just so we can explain to people about leukemia. Now, it attacks mainly the red blood cells?
It actually attacks the bone marrow. So if we look at the bone marrow as the blood factory, blood factory is going to produce three primary cells. It's going to produce our red blood cells, which are responsible for carrying oxygen throughout our body and keeping the oxygen flowing to every one of our organs. It produces white blood cells. White blood cells are what fight infections, whether it be the common cold, whether it be COVID, whether it be any disease. It's going to be our white blood cells that are central to our immune system. And then it's going to create platelets, and platelets are primarily responsible for clotting our blood and regulating the clotting of our blood. So if we get a cut, that's going to scab and going to stop us from bleeding out.
Right.
Meanwhile, it's able to regulate our body when it's working the way it should, so we can keep it flowing, so it's not clotting when it's inside our veins. So in the most simplistic form, we look at the bone marrow as that blood factory that's responsible for replacing the cells as they die off. And they just naturally die off in every healthy human being, and then they're replaced by the bone marrow or the blood factory.
So what I wanted to explain that, versus like a tumorous type of cancer versus a leukemia type of cancer, how do you differentiate that?
So a tumorous kind of cancer is really going to attack specific organs or specific tissues and really deteriorate the organ or the tissues or the muscles that it's attacking. So it's more of a physical attribute than a conceptual attribute with blood cancers. Blood cancers are really starting with a mutation of the cells. So, so it's not the cancer that we think of with lung cancer, where you can kind of cut away or treat purely with chemos or different types of radiations or traditional medicines of those natures. It really becomes something that's battled with a much more complex series of science that goes down to the DNA level.
Okay. So now we're talking about DNA. So let's go back to the beginning of the story. So your father calls you and says what? You went for a checkup.
Went for a regular wellness checkup, had some blood drawn. They saw some anomalies within within the different markers and profiles that they look at in a blood test, um, and started some initial concern. That then led to lots more blood tests where they went down more to the DNA level, literally and more simplistically, put it under a deeper microscope.
Okay.
So lots of different things happening within the blood, hundreds of markers that can be looked at, but specific markers within a traditional blood test or a routine wellness check were showing some anomalies. And some of those key indicators were lower white blood cell counts.
Okay. So I do know that's the white blood cell count for tumorous cancers or this type of cancer is always a factor, yes?
Generally speaking.
Okay. Now, so how far off were his numbers from the norm when you first happened?
So they were, at that stage, it's what they consider an observation stage. They were alarming enough that they were concerned, but not certain that it would move from MDS or pre-leukemia into a full-blown leukemia.
Right.
So breaking down some of the quantitative numbers, there's a threshold when the blood factory of the bone marrow is creating cells. Those cells will mutate, or what they call blast, and they look at blast rates, where they basically don't form into anything. They form into useless cells that just kind of clutter and become noise within what those respective cells have to mature into, and ultimately then have a pathway for their respective functions, whether it's fighting infection, whether it's red blood cells carrying the oxygen throughout the blood, or platelets regulating the clotting of the blood. At that point, he was right around a 5% blast rate.
Okay.
So effectively 5% of his cells were mutating and turning into nothing. Between 5 and 10% is where, and I apologize, let me go back, it's actually 20% where it becomes full-blown leukemia. Between 5 and 10% is in that observation stage where it still could be corrective, it could just be anomalies. So they continue to watch, and now they're carefully monitoring the labs of the blood and doing more frequent blood draws. Generally every couple of weeks, doing blood draws to figure out the rate and the frequency of how it's metastasizing.
Okay, so again, we understand that it's a deficiency with the white blood cells, and these blasts are creating basically no value to the human body whatsoever.
Correct.
Okay, and the body's not reproducing the healthy cells that it needs.
Correct.
So it's occupying its space.
It's occupying its space, but more detrimentally, it's not creating or regenerating the new white blood cells that are needed to continue to fight infection. So as the older white blood cells die off, they're not able to be replaced at the rate that they need to.
Okay, so I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to get the time frame. So now you get the phone call, he tells you they're off. So they said he's at the observation stage. How do you feel about just hanging out at the observation stage?
It's there's a lot of frustration because you have so many questions, you want so many answers, and a lot of the treatment of any blood cancer or any cancer for that matter, there's a balance of science and art. Part of that art is looking and understanding what's happening with all the dynamics of your different cells and your different makeup of the DNA, and what's happening throughout those processes. So as we're waiting kind of anxiously for the next labs to kind of understand, well, what's happening, when can we actually start taking action, and when that threshold of wanting to take action from a doctor's point of view or working with the clinical teams is at that 10% threshold, where it's now, okay, now we have to start aggressive treatment, and we have to figure out what that pathway is and what that plan is.
Okay, so now we're looking at from the first phone call to how often would you say he was going for blood tests?
Every few weeks.
2 weeks?
Every 2-3 weeks, yeah.
2-3 weeks. And did they consider it, I know they used the terminology aggressive. Was it aggressive in the beginning?
No, actually it wasn't. It was relatively slow, which added to the frustration and the anxiety. You almost wanted it to speed up to have a definitive answer so you could actually start a treatment and start a plan.
Okay. So now we are going 2 to 3 weeks. How many months went by before, okay, I'll ask the basic question. How many months went by before he reached that 20% threshold? At this point, during observation stage, they'll call it pre-leukemia?
Pre-leukemia. Well, okay. MDS is kind of synonymous with pre-leukemia.
Okay.
So that's from 0 to 10% is really that observation stage. Mm-hmm. From 10 to 19.9% is MDS or pre-leukemia. At 20% is now when they're looking at and calling it leukemia.
Okay, so you don't want to get to the 20%.
No, you definitely don't. Many people who have been diagnosed with leukemia haven't gone through a lot of these wellness checks or haven't had their doctor ask their doctor to do additional blood work or blood screening because it costs money. It costs money to do some advanced questioning of your health rather than just routine checkups where they might not be specialists or might not be looking for specific criteria in there. So many people, when they find out that they actually have leukemia, could have prevented earlier. Okay. Or taken action earlier. I shouldn't say prevented, could have taken action earlier. Right. Through the observation stages. So because of the importance of the wellness and the reality that not enough people are doing it, by the time leukemia comes in and things now become very symptomatic. Right. And trigger, where now doctors are starting to wonder, why is this person getting severely sick from a cold? Why are they having these certain reactions that really the body should be fighting off? Right. Those things don't typically happen with MDS patients. There's a lot of asymptomatic things happening within the blood. So because there's no symptoms there, we're not going to the doctor saying, hey, can you help fix this piece? I can't kick this cold. I don't know why. Right.
So, and I think that's a very sad thing to compare, because then it's almost like when they are diagnosed with leukemia, it's like, now what? Unlike when you can say that you're at the 10% threshold, there's a bigger percentage of hope.
Well, I think there's a bigger percentage of hope based on the mathematics. There's higher probability earlier on. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, the treatments are very similar. It's just a matter of how much more aggressive they have to get with the treatments, the more advanced stages you are throughout the process.
Okay, so now we're at before, I mean, obviously I know you, so I know you were already researching before he even got to that threshold. So at what percentage was he at, and how many months went by of these 2 to 3 week checkups before you actually decided to move forward and do something?
Yeah, so his initial observation range, I believe, was somewhere between about 6 and 7%, and was moving up frequently enough. Within about 3-4 months, it was up into that 8-9% range, where now they want to start pulling together the plan, because there's a lot of timing that goes in. It's not like you just start it. There's months of routines that have to take place before he can actually start the actual treatment.
Okay. One
of the greatest things around that time frame, though, when you're understanding and working on the planning of this, is that the doctor...
Everyone's complaining that we got to move closer and talk more. Hi, everybody.
We're going to get cozy.
Hi, Melissa. Hi, Christine. Thank you for watching. Everybody, please share. This is very important information, very vital to a lot of people who misunderstand about, who don't like to go to the doctor, and how something like this can be very crippling to a family and may not lead to something that you want to experience. Is that room or that
I
room?
think it's that room over there.
Okay. All right. So hold on one second. This is live, so something's happened. Okay. Is that better? Can you hear me now? Can you see us now? Okay. So, okay. So back to what you're saying. So now we're in 4 to 5 months of 2 to 3 week tests.
Yeah,
about 6
pretty
months.
pretty much about in
Okay.
that range.
And the highest threshold that he had hit before you started treatment?
Before we made the decision to actually start treatment. Yeah, so part of that process, one of the really exciting things that you actually hear from doctors is they use the term curative. Curative. They're talking about a cure, which is very rare for doctors to. Normally doctors are skittish. They're always afraid of the malpractice suits and all the promises, and very rarely do you hear the word cure. Now, as they're going, some early decisions had to be made, and they were really narrowed down to 3. Do nothing and live out your life and just hope that the rate of progression is as slow as possible, and just get the most out of the rest of your life. There is an option, what they call Vidasa. Vidasa is basically a form of a chemo, or it's a clinical. It's a clinical trial drug, and if approved, you can take the Vidasa, or you move on and make a decision to assemble a bone marrow transplant team and progress with what they call bone marrow transplant. It's actually a stem cell transplant, is what it actually is today. They actually don't do bone marrow transplants anymore. We can talk a little bit more about that process because it's pretty cool. So part of that decision was first, a decision that my father had to make, which is most important to him: quantity of life or quality of life.
Right, which there are a lot of obstacles. Like I was explaining earlier, when I was sick back in the day and going to the hematologist, oncologist, and watching these people and their quality of lives and trying to handle the chemo and trying to handle the radiation and all the other medicines that are involved in trying to fight cancer. It's so time consuming, it's so emotionally straining and physically straining.
Yep.
It really sucks the life out of you. And then I think that's a big key factor in all aspects of life. Like, what kind of quality of life do you want to live? What are you living for? What's most important to you when you get up in the morning and you open your eyes and you're like, another day. Is it another day of what? What do you want it to be? And that's why I tell people when they have any kind of problems in life, like, think about the quality of life you want to live. You have to love yourself. You have to love everything that you do, the people around you, all positive vibes. If you do not have that kind of support system within yourself, I don't know what you would be like to other people, So at the end of the day, like you said, the quality of life, your father chose not to do this this treatment with the Vidasa. Woo. Okay. Vidasa. And assuming that now he has this, not bone marrow, but stem cell transplant.
Correct. So while there's a limited number of treatments, the great word that we heard was curative, that there was a pathway to a cure. While there's never any promises in any medical treatment, that gave a lot of hope. So once he had to grapple with his own mortality, and then taking beyond the philosophical idea of quality of life versus quantity of life. It's when you're healthy, it's very easy to say, oh well, yes, I want the quality of life, but if you're facing mortality, it may be quite the opposite. That I
Right.
want another day.
I did want to ask you one question. So, when the doctor sat down and talked about his possible options, the mortality that they had given him, had he done nothing, was what?
Probably about a year.
Okay. So, okay, let's take a deep breath. So he was given 1 year if he had done nothing.
Maybe longer, but again, there was no mathematical certainty on it. Could have been 2 years, but we knew that at some point the disease would take over, and his body could just no longer fight anything.
Right. Because again, this is what you need to survive, to fight off even the common cold.
Yep.
Okay. So, as far as seeking treatment, besides the stem cell, there was nothing else they could do. This was the only three options.
Only three
do
options.
nothing.
The Vidasa,
The Vidasa.
or stem cell transplant or bone marrow transplant. And the Vidasa, when weighed, sounded very promising. It's got high success rates. It works. But that came back to the quality of life. And that meant that he would have been tethered to a facility, to where he chose. He chose the Mayo Clinic after visiting 3 different specialists in the field: University of Pennsylvania, Moffitt in Tampa, and Mayo Clinic out of Jacksonville.
I just want to repeat that because anybody out there that might need a piece of information about hospitals or facilities that do this, again, it was the
University of Pennsylvania in
University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia,
Moffitt Center in Tampa, Florida,
okay,
and Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville.
Okay.
So those are the 3 that we narrowed. There's several others throughout the country that do understand MDS.
But I'm sure you picked the top 3.
We hope we did. Ironically, almost every one of the doctors of all those teams, they went to school with the other people. It's a very small field. Mm-hmm. Almost all of them came out of Johns Hopkins, and all had the same professors, and so it is a small community of experts guiding the whole process. Really came down to which facility was convenient logistically, from the aftercare that was then required, and the longer part of the journey after the transplant.
Okay. So we make the decision to get the stem cell transplant. Where do you start?
So at that point, from the patient's perspective, from my father's point of view, it was lots of tests. They had to make sure he was healthy enough. Traditionally, they will not administer treatment for patients 75 or older. So he was quickly approaching that threshold. They then want sign-offs from cardiologists. They want his general practitioner and other doctors.
And this is not your normal pre-testing. This is
this is
very thorough.
You can handle, because we're going to destroy every blood cell that you have. We're going to bring you down to absolutely zero immune system, and you have to be the rest of your body has to be in healthy condition to be able to handle that kind of impact.
Okay. Did you, during the testing phase, did you run into any roadblocks?
No, we were actually very fortunate. Pop had, he actually had stents put in his heart a couple years prior. He was a survivor of prostate cancer, so he's been through a lot of unique challenges and battles. Beat all of those, and against all odds.
And it's important because I wanted people to understand, yes, the miracle's happening, and it wasn't because he was a Hercules.
No.
I mean, he's a Hercules to me, but I'm just saying, I want people to understand that, he didn't have a 100% record card to start off with.
No, he didn't. But what really helped was an overall healthy lifestyle. And it wasn't, the idea of exercising all the time, because it's not really who we are.
And it wasn't the cigar and the wines.
No, it wasn't the cigar and the wines. It wasn't the glasses of port. It was, it was 7 decades of living life by moderation. Part of his, yeah, as you mentioned earlier, he loves his food. He loves to travel, and and that's been a big part of his retirement. He was fortunate enough to retire early and have the luxury of having all those passions and being able to execute on all those passions. But I believe it was a lot of that moderation that led to an overall
Well,
strength
yeah, when
behind
you
it.
get to that point, which we hope that everybody gets to that point, you have a quality of life that's less stressful, more enjoyable, and obviously, the more you're happy, the more you smile, feel good, and your body. I think what people don't realize is your mental state is a big factor in the progression of becoming healthy or being healthy.
I definitely believe that the mental and the mindset going into it, you have to have a very positive outlook on life in general.
Right.
You have to really love life, and I think when you do really love life, and that's a combination of how you live your life, but also your family and how every aspect of your life plays out day after day after day for 70 plus years.
Right.
That is an ingrained mindset, and I think it takes a lot, especially when you're battling any sort of illness, to have that positive mindset to then be able to fight along with the physical aspects of any disease that you're fighting.
Okay. So just to back up just a little bit, because I don't know how many people know exactly the stem cell process works. So they sit down with you and they explain to you this process. So can you give me a generic blanket statement about how the actual process works as far as sucking out your stomachs? I mean, I'm sure you're going to say it in a better way than I am, but I mean, just so they get the significance of the actual procedure and how much it would take a toll on the human body to do something like this. I mean, um, you're obviously going to explain it better than I could, but I mean, even to listen to it, I know it's extremely powerful.
So obviously, as a son, it wasn't a question. However, my initial layman understanding of bone marrow transplants, I had heard that it's going to be painful, that they go in through the bone in the pelvis and literally drilling in, and it's a very invasive process. However, then learned that modern science over the past 10 years or so has completely changed that. From that bone marrow transplant idea where they're drilling in very invasively.
I just want to explain in a layman's term. Yep. Okay, so bone marrow, for those of you who don't know, I could explain it like this. You know those little doggy biscuits that are white on the outside and dark on the inside? Yep. So picture a human bone that they'd have to drill into and get to that marrow and then take it out. And I believe when you do bone marrow, you're awake?
I don't know. Okay. That's the old school way of doing it, right?
Okay,
so
right.
Modern science made it real easy for me.
Like, I do know that they do, well, we could always look that up and I'll get back to you on that, but I do know they do general anesthesia on the area. But I think they have to see, like, what's going on with you, your vitals.
Yeah, so for the most part, there are many alternatives now due to the advancements of science. Because ultimately, when they're going in for the bone marrow, they want to pull out those cells, right. The red cells, red blood cells, the white blood cells, and the platelets, mm-hmm. And they want to basically replicate those. Well, the way I had to go through, I basically went in. I had to go for 5 days and get some shots where they gave me some stem cell growth treatment. Most uncomfortable piece. It felt like growing pains. Literally made my cells just grow at rapid rates. And I literally...
It's almost like a Hulk type of feeling.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Like when we were kids, when you're a preteen, teenager, and you're having that growth spurt.
Right.
If anything, a little uncomfortable, but definitely didn't hurt. I milked it way more than I needed to. I didn't mind. My wife doted on me.
A stuffed animal, please.
Exactly.
So wait, I'm sorry.
Yep.
So again, they prepare you how?
They put a little swab, shoot this needle in, tell me to go home, come back the next day.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. And now you come back the next day, then what?
I did that for 5 days, and then on day
So basically, they're just checking you, like, as far as, like, your wellness, like, if you have any fevers, you have any discomfort, or any kind of side effects. Is that basically why you went back every day?
no, just to get additional
Okay.
growth treatments.
Okay. So would they consider that, like, I don't want to put the wrong medical terminology, but I mean, would they consider that like a growth hormone
Yeah.
steroid type of
Well, I don't know
thing?
about steroid, but it's a growth inhibitor or enhancement.
Okay.
Not inhibitor, enhancement.
Okay.
So it's just making my cells produce at a faster rate.
Okay. Did you feel any kind of stimulation or different physical characteristics after day 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5?
Nope, not good.
Okay.
Nope. Again, just a little bit of growing pains at 40 something years old.
Okay.
The one wellness piece that they did a chest X-ray and an EKG just to make sure that I was generically healthy enough to handle. Because on day 5, they did what they considered surgery, but it was literally, it just happened to be because it was in an OR or an operating room. They inserted a port into my aortic vein. So that port just allowed easier extraction of what they wanted to take. Then on day 6 and day 7, I went in for about 5-6 hours, loaded up with Netflix, sat in a chair, had wonderful nursing staff just bringing me snacks however frequently I wanted, and they literally hooked up 2 tubes into the port, and that was hooked up to a machine that literally sucked my blood out, spun it around through a centrifuge, took out the DNA and the stem cells that they wanted, the components of my blood that they wanted.
Okay, so there's a machine.
Yep.
A centrifuge. Now, I think, because I've seen pictures, it's almost like when somebody does like a kidney thing.
Kind of like a dialysis
type of thing, right? Okay. So this machine separates your blood with DNA and stem cells?
With stem cells and then the rest of the blood.
Okay.
The rest of the components of the blood.
Okay.
So it literally...
But the stem cells has your DNA in it.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So now it literally pulls it out, and then through the other port, it just puts it right back into my body. So literally like a blood transfusion of myself. Okay,
so it was filtering your blood to extract the stem cells and then put the blood back in without your stem cells.
Correct.
Pretty much.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow, that's flipping cool.
Yep.
Okay, and then what?
So their target range, they were looking for 5 million cells. So really not that many. That was their target.
Oh, yeah, 5 million. What's 5
but
million
we have
cells?
billions, right? So they were looking for 5 million cells to be able to do this treatment. And the whole goal was, and complexities during COVID were whether or not they were going to take my stem cells, freeze them, which is not optimal, versus a live transplant.
Okay.
So while I'm going through this, Pop is now getting prepped to be able
simultaneous.
to this. Simultaneously, he's in another wing of the hospital, and he's now checked in. So at that point, we were able to accomplish in 2 5-hour sessions to exceed the 5 million cells that they wanted. My job was done. Wow. Literally had a bag that they handed over to the blood marrow transplant team, and now it was time to prep my father. So part of that preparation was some chemo to kill off his blood cells. They wanted to kill off as many of the blood cells as possible.
And that was before he accepted not
Correct.
The same day, obviously.
Correct. Yeah, so it was kind of a series leading up into there. And then...
No, I'm sorry, because we don't have him speaking today. So it was before he was able to accept the stem cells from you, he had to go through just chemo?
Well, it was a concentrated chemo, yeah. So effectively, yes.
Okay. And then obviously staying healthy, keeping away from people and germs and isolating himself.
So at this point, he's now checked.
Quarantining?
Yeah, he's checked in and he's in an isolated wing. Okay. So nobody's going in and out of that wing. It's a very sterile environment. The only person in our family that was allowed to enter that wing was my mother.
Okay.
And after lots of checks and lots of extra precautions, wearing lots of gowns.
So he was basically Michael in the bubble.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Okay.
So even the nursing staff and the doctors that are there, they'll do 24-hour on floor. They can't leave that wing.
Okay.
So they're not going in and out of that wing frequently. So they go through certain precautions just to make sure they're mitigating any potential foreign objects coming into that wing.
Okay. So now he receives your stem cell. How is he feeling after the first, like you did it twice, you said, right?
Yes.
Same day?
So I did 2 separate days, about 5-6 hours each day.
Okay. And how far apart were the days?
Oh, back to back.
Okay. So now he gets the first transplant. How does he feel?
So at that point, he receives everything, and I don't think he really felt anything. He was very asymptomatic through that process as well. He still had all his hair, so the chemo hadn't attacked that yet. I think at that stage, it was more the beginning stages of cabin fever. Stuck in a hospital where limited menu of what you can have, limited interaction with outside, and I think that was probably the most frustrating part of the process.
Well,
but
again,
and
that's what I was saying about the mental state, because you're talking about, like I had stated earlier, about him being somebody who was out and about and socializing and restaurants and whining and dining and traveling and finding his favorite bench. And now he's cooped up.
Yep.
And he's with a debilitating possible future mortality. But yet now he has this treatment and he's stuck in just the beginning of stages. And I think that's what's the hardest for everyone.
Well, that's really now the official beginning of the journey. And they have kind of like a shuttle launching. They'll have T minus leading up to, and then they have T plus. The day of the transplant is almost like a rebirth. So that's now day 1 or day 0, the day he receives it, and then it's counting up the days from there.
Now, I had to ask you something. Before the transplant, right, you were saying that they drain him of his stuff?
No. What they do is try and kill off through targeted chemo. They're trying to kill off any of the diseased cells that he has in his body.
That has metastasized.
Correct.
Okay.
Which also happens to kill healthy cells as well.
Right.
But most important is that when my stem cells are introduced, his body doesn't try and attack them.
Right.
That
well, let's talk about stem cells for a second.
Yep.
Okay, so stem cells are good cells. And well, you want the good stem cells, I should say. And so basically your stem cells were replenishing the bad cells.
Correct.
And that's the way the human body operates, I believe. Yeah. Okay. So go ahead.
Yeah.
So now he's receiving this treatment. So how does it start affecting him after a week or 2?
So again, he was very asymptomatic throughout. There was about a week in, as he received other treatments following that, they would replenish him with fluids, replenish him with magnesium, because there were certain drugs that were counteracting certain negative effects. Then there were also a series of drugs that were designed to help stimulate other positive effects. So each one had pros and cons along with it. So they're constantly monitoring all these different medications. At some points, up to 24 different medications being administered and readjusted, day by day, to try and get to that art. Again, the art of what these doctors are trying to accomplish. Right. It's not just a set. Take 2 pills and call me in the morning.
And again, which is very debilitating, very mentally and physically straining.
Yes.
It's not, nothing is a quick fix when you have a kind of cancer that can be, obviously, with the mortality involved. I mean, you're facing death. You're fighting death. You're fighting the clock. And now you have to go through this and through this. And I think that's why a lot of people give up.
Well, that's why we refer to it as a journey. It really is, and it is an ongoing. We're approaching day 200. So day 200 from the transplant. And there's certain milestones. There's day 100 that becomes a milestone, but it's really that 1 year mark where they then kind of reevaluate, reassess. Did this even work? Did this do what we wanted it to do? We still don't know. We're very optimistic by watching the numbers, by watching how much of my DNA takes over. Of his red blood cells, I believe I'm 95%. His DNA, my DNA is 95% his red blood cells, and approaching 100% of the white blood cells. So we see these indicators
Right.
At each of the checkups, and the checkups become a little less frequent, maybe every 2 weeks now. But it's looking for those milestones until I effectively have, or my stem cells effectively take over predominantly within his blood, but he still has all his other DNA as well. So that actually brings into fun stuff. Any Law and Order lawyer would have fun. Did he really do it? Whose DNA was it? Because he actually carries two sets of very distinctly different DNA in his blood.
Now, do the doctors say at one point, do they mesh together, or they're always going to be separated?
So they're always separate.
Like, because I know they grow together and mutate and more and more and more, right? So it becomes 2, and then it goes 4 and 6 and 8.
So the idea is, within the blood is my DNA takes over and takes control of that blood factory.
Okay.
So it's really just that blood factory. So if we think about it, and I think when they use the term transplant, if we think of that idea that on something a little more, I guess, kind of mainstream understanding of a transplant, if I received a heart transplant, that's somebody else's heart, somebody else's tissue, that DNA.
Right.
That DNA will still always be that DNA in that heart.
Okay.
Now, the trick is figuring out for my father's body to figure out how to coexist with my DNA. That my DNA doesn't become too aggressive and try and kill other cells or attack other cells that are foreign to it. And so his remaining DNA doesn't see mine as a threat and learns to coexist with mine.
Okay.
And that brings into probably the most significant events after the transplant that they're looking at, which is what they call GVHD, graft versus host disease. So
yes. Okay.
Right? So I'm the graft. He's the host. Now, which one's going to win? So there's going to be fighting there.
Right.
It's a territorial fight. So sometimes it's attacking a cold, sometimes it's attacking a perfectly healthy cell. Right. So figuring out that balance, and that's where a lot of different balances of his medications help regulate those pieces, help suppress some of his cells, say, calm down.
Right.
Existing host DNA. It's okay that Dale's here. He's here to do some good stuff. So it will suppress certain areas when we see these both symptomatic and asymptomatic versions of GVHD.
Okay, so in layman terms, me being a school teacher, I could say one thing. So in science, you learn about homeostasis. So the body always wants to create a balance. So like what he was saying was, so you have this stem cell, you have the bad stem cells, and when foreign things come into your body wants to fight it. Okay. Dale's DNA stem cells are good. His dad's DNA cells that he has left are good. Hopefully most of the bad ones are gone. They're still not going to want to just let you take over, because they're still going to try and fight Dale. And that's what he's explaining, is that there's going to be a fight.
And that's what fathers and sons do.
And I mean, and I'm sure like people categorize like DNA and personality traits. Oh, you get that from your mother, you get that from your father. And now it's like, will he get some of it from you? Like, it's just biologically going to be possible.
I'm hopeful. I would love to have a second me out there.
I don't know. I'm not going to take a vote on that tonight.
But no, I don't think it's going to change that personality of him or the other structures again.
Well, no, personality is always based on how you were raised in your environment and stuff like that. But biologically speaking, like I'm Asian, and when I was born, my hair was pinned straight like a little China doll, right? my dad, who was German, Irish, Scottish, whatever, he had like big German curls. Now, when I get out of the shower, my hair's like all curly. You know, and it's like the funny, like people have asked me, do you get perms, body waves? And I'm like, no, this is my natural hair.
So that's the rest of his DNA. So it's
Right.
again, it's coexisting with the rest of that. So it's not going to change those traits. But that does bring over to a very interesting side of when they're looking for that match and what they're optimally looking for. And at first, what the doctors want to see is a full blood sibling with the basic idea that half our DNA comes from mom and half comes from dad.
Okay.
So the same would happen with a full blood sibling, where they would have half from their mom and dad. So the highest probability of a match is really that full blood sibling.
Okay, so can we look at that as talking about predominant and recessive genes, a kind of almost like a cut and square type of thing? When you talk about eye color. And,
yeah, no. I think it's going deeper into the DNA,
right.
deeper into the DNA, but ultimately more simplistic. That you're
Okay.
half mom and half dad. Not really a dominant factor there. However, that wasn't an option for my father because he's an only biological child. He
Right.
doesn't have a full blood sibling.
So let's talk about that. Okay. So before you decided to be, before you found out that you can be an actual donor, how many people tested? What other avenues were you looking for a donor?
So simultaneously there were two sets of searches happening. First search was isolated to myself, my brother, and my sister. My brother and myself and my brother being the most probable match, because certain things happen with any daughter that is a potential donor. If she's had children, the second she's had children, certain things happen within her antibodies that are designed to protect the baby in the womb, and so there's certain pieces there that are actually could be counterproductive or dangerous. Even though she could be a match, there are concerns of her DNA being too aggressive. Same way that she would be protecting the child from foreign infection or foreign.
So would it be fair to say that a male would be preferable?
In this situation, yes.
Okay.
Was more probable. So it actually came down. My brother and I were almost identical. We found that we were like to the fifth decimal point actually identical twins. But it was really weird from a DNA perspective.
Wow.
Definitely way different personalities.
I was going to say, only that part. Sorry, Wayne. I love you, Wayne.
He got the smarts, I got the looks, right?
I happen to think he's a very good-looking person, but we don't want to talk about your head not fitting through the front door.
Hence the big cowboy hat.
Yeah, it barely fits. So now, what other searches have you done?
So the other search actually is an international registry.
Okay.
So they're looking into databases of many people that have volunteered to be potential donors, where they've given either blood samples or given bone marrow samples or stem cell samples.
Let's talk about that, please. Okay. So the foundation, is it?
Yeah. So there's a group called Be the Match that really leads the way in this niche of blood cancers of being a central registry, a central international registry of DNA. Because the reality of it is, if your donor happens to be a match and lives in Germany, well, modern day, they can have that person do the same treatment I did, throw it on a plane and have it there in 12 hours, and have it ready for the recipient.
And meant to mention this before. So it thoroughly is just like a transplant, a live transplant. If someone needed a heart,
correct,
a liver, or anything like that, like they transfer it live.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the same thing that goes on where you were sitting there draining your body of your stem cells and your dad was in another room. So it physically is a transplant part of the body.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead.
So at that point, with the registry highly encourage everybody just to go to Be the Match, go to bethematch.com and order a registry kit. It's a swab that at home. They'll mail you a swab. You swab the inside of your cheek, put it back into the kit, follow the instructions, put it back in the prepaid envelope, mail it back to them, and possibly you're going to be a match one day. Possibly you're going to get a call to come in, get the 5 shots over 5 days, sit there, watch some Netflix, eat some good snacks, and save somebody's life. It's really a simple process.
Okay, so we're going to talk about this because this is something, part of the reason why I started the show is to get information out there. People think of, donating their blood or giving blood to help somebody. We've gone through this COVID thing where people have been donating plasma to figure out the cure for COVID and to come up with a vaccine. Okay, we're talking about being the match and saving somebody's life. Anywhere from an infant to an older person under 75. And we're talking about swabbing your mouth. You don't have to stick it 3 inches up your nose to find out if you have COVID.
I did the COVID test. Way less invasive.
I don't know how many people had received a COVID test in the last year, but, we're probably in the millions.
Yeah, it's a little uncomfortable.
So, try and be the match. Like they said, you just go on the website, you get a kit at home, you swab your mouth, just like they have those DNA kits.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing that a lot of people do in the whole, what is that?
No, they do the Ancestry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, if you're one of those people looking and maybe you haven't found a higher sense of purpose in life, maybe you're looking to make up for some of the bad you did. Just saying. You want to be somebody's angel. You want to be something other than what you're being yourself. I would highly suggest that you go into the website, be the match, and think about you can change somebody's life, somebody's family, somebody's destination. There's nothing wrong with trying. You could always say no. I can't be a match. Not yet. I have to wait because, one, I have type 2 diabetes. That wasn't a huge factor, but it was definitely a factor. But I'm only 3 years out of having MRSA. So I couldn't do it just yet because as soon as I came after my visit, I went to go look. But anyway, like I said, it's really that simple. So please go to bethematch.com. I don't know. Yeah. I'm sure if you search it, there's nobody on here that doesn't know how to search the internet. I got kids.
They have an awesome Facebook page too.
Yeah, so you can check it out on Facebook and things like that. So it's important right now. The world is in a lot of despair right now, and there are so many people who can use your help. So please take the time, check it out. Share it with people, share it with friends. If you have any questions all about what we've been speaking about tonight, you can inbox me with questions. You can ask me whatever it is that you want. Let me stop and say hi. Hi, Michael. Hi, Caitlin.
Oh, I missed that. So not sure which analogy Griffin was talking to.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe the bone marrow.
Oh, okay.
The bone. What's the website? Oh, somebody posted the website here.
BeTheMatchFoundation.org.
Okay. And hi, Tracy. Thank you for watching. Thanks again, Michael. I have amazing friends, and I'm so glad that you all came on here to watch the show. Again, like we're talking about Be the Match, I want to finish the story, though. So now we are at, how long now?
I think we're 181 days.
Okay. In the background, that's my godfather. He didn't want to be on TV.
You want me to pop in?
Sure.
Cameo appearance.
Hi. Whoops. Hi.
This is the survivor.
Just a cameo appearance. I'm the other half of the DNA, celebrating my son's birthday today.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Thankfully that I made it. And
your birthday too now, too?
Yeah, it's my birthday. I got 3 now. But anyway, I just can't express in words what it means to someone who is in need. And it's, as Dale described eloquently, from the donor perspective, it's it's pretty much a painless process, and what the benefit derived from someone that is in need is just incredible. So thank you all. Thanks for doing this.
I love you.
Love you, Pop.
Love you.
I didn't want to cry.
Don't cry.
Everybody knows me. I got more tears than Niagara Falls. I'm trying so hard. All right. Let's not sugarcoat it. I know that there's been some side effects and some trials and tribulations that he has gone through to get to this point today. So let's talk about some of those. Mm-hmm. So that I'm out here trying to give awareness. I want to give as much information as possible so that nobody's surprised, because it's always better to go in it listening to this, that, and this is why I do the show, because I want to talk to real people who get real experience. And these pamphlets, they're great. They have a lot of information. These are from the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society.
Information's great, but it's never going to tell you the perspective.
And like this is, and just like anything in life, that's why I'm doing my show, is because I want to talk to real people that have been affected by it, that are going through it. And again, not everybody's story is going to be the same, but like they say, the more you know, you know.
Yep. So we talked a little bit about graft versus host, and that's always right now the big looming scary piece. Very high rates of graft versus host disease, making the pathway to cure fail.
And when you say graft, and this is, again, layman's terms, I always stop you there because you're so smart. So basically, anytime your body receives something from another human, so even from another body part, there's this thing where it may not accept it. They call it accepting of the graft.
Correct.
Right. So some people get surgery, and they also, like an ACL, right? They can get a graft from a cadaver bone, right, and replace it, but that doesn't mean your body's going to accept it.
Correct.
So that's basically what you're talking
Correct.
about. So go ahead.
Yep. So that's right now. That's always the looming piece that we're looking at, and there's so many different pieces. A lot of asymptomatic things that can happen. There's risks of organ failure, where my cells might attack his liver. Might not like what his liver is doing, and might just attack his liver. Might be his kidneys. Might be his heart. Could be anything. So they're always looking at those pieces. It's not just my blood cells against his blood cells. It's how the body's overall reacting to it. Fortunately for Pop's journey, the side effects have been relatively minimal. He has some rashes, and those rashes will kind of appear all over his body, and aesthetically it's kind of annoying and ugly. But the doctors actually like some form of graft versus host disease, because it's saying, wait, they're figuring it out.
Right.
Sometimes the kids have to fight to figure out whose turf it is.
Right.
Well, that's kind of what his body's doing now. So they want to see some aspects of graft versus host, because it's now seeing that my stem cells are working, his are working, and we're trying to find our common ground. Some of the annoying pieces that he's had, he's lost taste, significant amount of taste. So for the foodie who loves to have great meals every day, that's very frustrating. Again, it kind of attacks that quality of life, and we don't know if it's going to come back. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. That's one of those ones that docs say, if you don't get it back, you're still alive. Sucks.
Right.
But keep on going. So far from out of the woods, and that's where we're looking at that 1 year mark in that journey to kind of declare a winner or a loss or kind of a neutral. At some point, if graft versus host does take over, well, then we have to figure out, what do we do next? Do we do this whole process all over? Is that an option?
Well, let's talk about also when he first came out of the hospital. It was quarantine 100%.
Yes, very strict quarantine, very limited interaction. Only primary caregiver, which was my mother.
And for how long?
Well, that's
Because we're all, I don't want to talk about
Yeah.
quarantine because we're all
Yeah.
very familiar with that right now.
So actually, if anything, COVID actually helped prepare us for a lot of this.
Right, and
Conditioned us
again,
to the idea
it
of,
probably was,
of not being able to go out. So after he was in the hospital in very isolated quarantine for about 26 days, they projected 30 days. He got out a little early release for good behavior. And then when he went home, it was strict isolation, no going out. All his errands had to be run for him. He wasn't allowed to touch any food, prep any food. He wasn't allowed to be around any cleaning supplies. Literally sterilized hospital kind of.
like I said,
room.
Michael in a bubble.
Yes.
And I do want to stop.
At least
for
with
a
the comfort
second.
of his own home.
Yeah. I do want to say something. Again, I chose Facebook Live. There are always negative people, and they say, "Oh, I don't do Facebook. It's this and that." You know what though? Through my godfather's journey, even though he was in the hospital eating hospital food, he would still post things and get comments. And I found a lot of positive vibes through Facebook for him, and it entertained him as well. And honestly, it was a great way to reach everybody, to let everybody know how you feel and what you're doing. He posted a journey page and we would follow him. And I thought it was the greatest thing in the world, and that's why I chose Facebook as a platform to use it in a positive way. A lot of things in life don't have to be negative. It's all about what you do with your life. And I thought this journey was extremely important to share because like I said before, a lot of people give up, and there are support systems. And again, earlier in my intro show, I said, somebody helps somebody. If one more person gets help, like even today, if one person becomes the match and saves somebody's life, how amazing is that? What a miracle that could be, that you could save somebody's life and not be a doctor.
And when we created the Journey page or the Journey group, that was a large part of it. It was, first creating the chronological reality, the ups, the downs, the good, the bad, no sugarcoating. It was, unedited, unfiltered. And there were really bad days. There were, especially in the hospital, there was some reactions to, believe it or not, Benadryl. Benadryl was, of all this scary stuff, what we can buy over the counter. He had a reaction to it.
And there were a couple loop-de-loop posts.
Yeah.
We won't talk about
They were kind of funny. Hindsight, it was a little scary in the moment, but they were funny. We thought
I was like,
somehow, Pop got the bourbon, found the bourbon somewhere. But it was really, the Benadryl had some reactions, and
yeah, when I saw that, like, I couldn't believe it was like Benadryl, really.
Yeah. And further research showed that Benadryl is actually known to be a high-risk danger to senior patients. So it's great for kids and colds and or just giving them something to put them to sleep and regular anaphylactic reactions. But there's much higher risk that's not really widely known in senior patients. It's very often 75+% of the time misdiagnosed and completely missed. And this actually leads to delirium and basically the idea of having hallucinations and
so again, another piece of information you would never have thought. And so if you have an elderly person in your life and they happen to take Benadryl one day and they're just because some people say that, like, oh, it makes you loopy, but it might be really doing other damage, so you need to pay attention.
Yeah, and then, when I started reading up on that piece, because I wanted to understand, and I'm trying to work with teams of doctors, and because doctors also rely heavily on the family to identify, deviations in personality and demeanor. Right. So they look at the science, but they're also looking at that cocktail of a couple dozen different meds, trying to figure out which one did it. Right. So they're kind of playing house in what they're doing and trial and error. Well, let's remove this one, try this one. Right. So doctors all had their initial opinions, and some wanted to blame steroids, some wanted to blame other stuff, but they're literally playing house.
Right.
Yeah, like Dr. House.
Yeah. I was gonna say not playing house like the Brady Bunch, but Dr. House.
Dr. House.
Like, and who doesn't love him?
Yeah,
you know
Hugh
what
Laurie,
I mean?
he's awesome.
So now we're on this journey. He starts coming out of quarantine. He finds out he cannot taste anything.
Mm-hmm.
He's not happy about it.
Yeah, that one just kind of popped up out of nowhere. At about day 150.
And so today we're at day
182.
182. And day 182 makes me so happy because I get to see him. I get to hug him. I get to cook for him.
We're going to fatten him
and
up.
I've got to fatten him up. Okay, that's another thing.
Yeah, he lost a lot of
weight.
Yep. And not due to lack of appetite. He's definitely eating a lot. He's really never lost his appetite throughout the whole process.
I've literally gained 7 pounds since I got here, which was 1 o'clock this afternoon.
Yeah. Now, one thing we do well is we feed everybody well. But his body is, his metabolism is just on overdrive. His body is just doing so much, so he's just burning calories as fast as he can take them in. So he had some initial significant weight loss, probably lost about 35, 40 pounds. He was down to like high school weight. Then, systematically, it's you can only take in so many calories a day. You can only eat so much. So.
Well, because then you start looking into other problems.
Yeah.
High cholesterol, too many carbs,
even when we're trying to replace him, whether it be through, protein shakes and supplements, and his body is just, doing so much, working so much, which is, again, it's a good sign. It's showing that he's healthy, that his body's working the way it's supposed to work. But packing those calories on and fattening him up is a unique challenge.
When they do a test like that, can they say why he's is his metabolism high? Is his thyroid in overdrive? Are there any medical contributions to the not being able to gain weight, or could it just be because he's getting Dale's DNA of a younger version maybe, and then being skinny?
Honestly, I don't think they've really looked that far.
I mean, he's never been
they don't
obese or anything,
and they don't see it as really a concern.
Right.
So they don't spend a lot of time focusing on things that are not a concern.
Well, he's not anorexic.
Yeah, it's not like he's at an unhealthy low weight.
Right.
We're just used to seeing.
We're
just used to seeing him a little, little plump.
Yeah. Well, we have to contribute all that eating to something.
Exactly.
So how are his numbers? How are his white blood cell counts?
Yeah, so everything is just systematically climbing. It's ahead of the trends and the schedules that they're looking at. We'll know, I believe it's March 2nd is the next bone marrow biopsy. So he actually still has to do those, where they'll drill in, they'll go in through his butt, drill into his pelvis, and they'll extract actual bone marrow. So that's uncomfortable for him.
Wait, say that one more time, because I heard butt and bone, and
it's actually in the upper hip. I think they go into the upper part of the pelvis, and they'll just drill a little hole in and stick a big needle in and extract out the bone marrow, so they can do a deeper analysis other than just high level blood work. And
if you can explain, so they want to look in the bone marrow to see what?
So now they're literally looking at every different facet, all the components of the blood and the bone marrow. So they want to look at things at a very molecular and DNA level. So they're now looking at white blood cells and all the different derivatives. There's all kinds of different types of white blood cells that are there. So they literally want to go in and start counting how many cells. So they'll take, maybe 400 or 500 cells and then kind of match them up and see how they fall. And they'll literally count them one by one under
one for Dale, one for Fred, one for Dale, one for Fred, two for Dale, two Fred. Okay.
So they'll bring it down to that microscopic of a level. Literally looking and counting under a microscope those different types of cells as they separate them out. So along the way, what they're looking at is that rate of increase, making sure that there's no significant decreases without justification or reasoning, because sometimes the numbers do fall back, and it just means they adjust some of the meds that he's on. Again, he's still, he probably takes 20, I think it's 17 or 20 different meds a day.
Are they all in pill form, shots? Or?
All pill form. All pill form.
Okay.
But it's a lot of pills. Divvying up 3 times a day, and really coordinating the schedule. That was a complex task. Really using great container systems to make sure that you're taking the right meds at the right times. But and those are constantly being adjusted as well. So as he's going through those different blood tests, they're looking for certain certain indicators, and they might adjust one of the meds up, maybe 0.5 milligram or down a milligram. But when we get to then the different milestones within where they then do the bone marrow biopsy, going through the hip, now they're looking much deeper. They're saying, okay, well, we can see these things at high level, where it doesn't make sense to go into your hip every week to do blood work.
Right.
They'll now go in and they're going to now look to establish where that milestone is, which will be roughly about roughly about the 6-month point. Will be a little over the 6-month point, based on where it falls.
Okay. So how long has it been since he's received your transfusion?
182 days.
That's the number.
That's the day that we count.
Okay. Now my other question is the taste. Have they said that's like a normal side effect? Like but like one of the side effects?
It's one of the possible side effects. It's something that we counteract. We found tricks, put lemon on things, lots of garlic. So there's certain things that, will be
I'm making Korean spicy
things
food.
that will be more pronounced. But now also at that milestone, one of the next steps is actually to be revaccinated with all of his childhood vaccines.
Really?
Yep. So including some of the vaccinations that you just naturally get from your mother when you're in the womb. So for things that we've never heard of, he'll get vaccinated for.
Okay.
So while everybody's worried about COVID, well, he's got to get all of the ones that we got as little kids and that we progressively got as little kids, because all of them are gone. We've destroyed all of those, and now we have to revaccinate.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like maybe he got your younger DNA or something. You know what I mean? Like, And what about? So I mean, you could almost say like because he's reborn again, right? So he doesn't have all these other influences in gaining weight. Like over the years, we talk about how all these biochemical foods and environment and everything created all this obesity and stuff like that. I mean, maybe he's just starting from scratch.
It's an interesting perspective, and you're definitely going to have me Googling more on that. I never really thought about going down that path.
Oh, you know me and my trick, I just go all over the place.
But it absolutely is a possibility.
And then I was thinking maybe and because he has this frail body and the medications he's receiving, maybe one of them or the combination of them might have set off his sensitivity to taste.
That is a possibility. It could be environmental as well.
Right.
Again, you just really don't know. And when the bone marrow transplant team or his team of doctors are looking at things, the least of their concerns is whether or not he can taste his food. So I don't think they want to mess with his meds.
But here we know how he is, and we know he wants that damn taste back.
We know how frustrating it is.
And then I was thinking, like, okay, and I'm not going to go off subject anymore, but I'm just going to say this one more thing. And then, like, we can always make a correlation to similar something as COVID because that's one of the side symptoms that is huge.
Yeah. Well, and that was my first reaction. I said, get another COVID test. So they've given him his COVID test. I said, get another COVID test because we know that loss of taste.
But why is the loss of taste through COVID? So that's what we need to find out. Why is that a symptom?
Do they know yet?
No, but that's something we can look into.
So maybe whatever that is, right?
Is it semi-correlation? Now, did he get the vaccine?
No, not yet. So his revaccinations, including COVID, will come in series based on where the doctors feel comfortable at certain stages, pretty much over the next 6 months. They'll begin revaccinating him.
So he'll get his pox, his polio, his MMRs, his PRP, like all that.
All of them. And then again, also ones that we've never heard of, right? That are natural antibodies that are transferred from the mother in the womb.
For your immunity.
Right? So when you're in the womb, the mother's giving natural vaccinations.
But now it's 2020.
Yep.
Right? and we have all this other
2021.
information.
New year.
2021. Oh, you know
2020 is
why?
behind us.
Okay, you know why I don't say that? It's because that makes me another year older, Dale. My birthday. So my girlfriend corrected me the other day. She's like, I'm 50 and I'm grown. And she's like, you're 51. She goes, if I have to be 52, you have to be 51. I was like, this is the first time I'm saying it out loud. I was like, oh. Okay, so 2021.
Yep.
So now we know all these other precursors about the results of all these vaccines. So do they take that in consideration? Maybe not do this one and not do them. So they say like it causes autism, it causes this. And again, there's no published guaranteed. I'm not going to get in trouble for saying anything. I'm just saying, talking about the thoughts that are out there about taking too many vaccines at once. Like, does anybody question all that before he gets all those things?
So, short answer, no. The short answer is they're saying you're going to be revaccinated with everything.
Right.
And following traditional medicine and traditional science or Western medicine and science. Now, I guess arguably, that becomes a whole nother tangent. Are there side effects or long term or whatever? At 74 years old, who cares? If it protects you, for the next, if it protects you now, that's really kind of the point. If there's side effects 20 years from now, well, I hope there is, because that means he's still here.
Right. So 182 days. My godfather's still here. He drives like a maniac still. He's like, find your own rides to the airport. He's still sarcastic. He's still funny. He's still lovable. He's still here. And it makes me so happy. We all get busy in life. We have families. We grow apart. We said, oh, nothing's been the same since so-and-so passed away. Or nothing's been the same. When I reconnected with him and through all this, like, he always was my godmother, especially too. God bless that woman. No one can ever keep up with her. They were my godparents. They were my faves when I was a kid. I couldn't wait to see them. I'll never forget that I got a phone call when they moved to the Carolinas. And there was a hurricane, and I cried for like 3 days because I thought the house was gonna go like Dorothy's, because I was young, and they were in Jersey and all over the place. But I don't know, like sometimes I always have this thing like people come in and out of your life at certain times for a sense of purpose, And I was feeling a certain kind of way, and when we reconnected, it's like my whole life is like put back together again. And it wasn't with a sense of purpose of him or you or anything else like that. I just feel so whole that I get to be part of this again. I feel like something was missing and then God filled it. So I wanted to share this journey with everyone because, again, talking about being part of a community, being part of a society, a lot of people are sitting home and they're depressed. I have a show coming up, and we're going to talk about depression and anxiety. They're two separate entities, although they do correlate a little, and mental stability. This wasn't an easy. I know Dale makes it seem so light and so perfect. It was far from that.
No, and it wasn't, but it's a combination of so many different pieces. That I think we get wrapped up in day-to-day life and we see what's in front of us and think that that's the most important thing happening today. And then today becomes tomorrow becomes the next day. And it's very easy, and especially in the world of social media. Social media can be good or bad. We look at this idea that you're connected, and because you like some comments. So it's two competing ideas. One thing, the positive side of what Facebook did was it pulled back hundreds of people that have been in our lives literally over 7 decades. Put these pieces together. Throughout part of that journey, Pop was trying to understand his medical history. He was adopted, right? Which is why we don't know of any biological siblings that he has there.
And again, another humongous point about children being adopted and not knowing the history. If you have a family, know your history, know your medical history, know your relatives, know your great aunts, your uncles, anybody that has some free time in their hands, like half the world right now, find out. Because if it's not for you, and a lot of people say, oh, I don't care, I don't care. If it's not for you, it could be for your children, for your cousin, for whomever that might be in your bloodline.
Yeah.
Because again, you'd be saving a life, and you may not even be donating. Might just be that piece of knowledge. You know, they say that mental illness runs in the family, other genetic diseases run in the family. You know, you just never know. When the doctor asks you questions and you fill out that form, be honest. They can't help you if you're not honest. Any intake, whether it's a mental intake, a physical intake, if you're not honest with them, they can't help you.
Well, and also for, if you have children, can't help your children. My father, a lot of what he wanted to find was his medical history so he could help my brother, my sister, and myself understand our medical history as well.
Right.
Because there's a lot of important indicators there. But power of Facebook. Along the way, one of the beautiful, unexpected surprises that we found was my father found 3 half-sisters.
Yes.
And we're now in regular communication. We can't wait until COVID restrictions are lifted and we can get him, more interacted and not as isolated. Can't wait to meet him in person. But that was really exciting. And that was one of those tangential pieces that happened. But the first step comes with really trusting your circles and your community and going back and letting people know, informing. That's why we're doing this, to show other people. This is a very private matter in many aspects, as anybody's medical journeys are. But we thought by sharing our journey, we would be able to maybe help one other person or 2 other people or so on. But also
I'm going to show you the commercial.
Okay. Well, but we got some selfish, some selfish return out of it as well.
Right.
That journey and that community that we built through Facebook groups and pages gave back exponentially. Right. I mean, friends from out of the woodworks. We actually found out that a buddy of Dad's that he used to work with in the Carolinas, turns out one of his grandkids is now marrying one of my father's great grandnieces.
Oh my goodness.
Shows that how connected the world is. I'm a big believer that the world's not 6 degrees of separation, that it's 2 or less degrees of separation.
Right.
And this journey really helped prove a lot of that. And there was a lot of very specific value that came out of it. Both from the mental support, the emotional support. Those are the 2 most important factors.
Right. Having
those pieces and trusting others. Because you can't do it on your own. And your immediate family, no matter how great or wonderful they are, you can't do it on your own. It does take a small army and a small village to get through this journey, even when it's having that bad day and just getting those words of encouragement coming back through.
Right.
The other side of where we like Facebook, and I'm not a big fan of promoting Mark Zuckerberg and Big Brother. Again, necessary evil, but.
Don't say nothing, then they're gonna take my show off.
We're gonna get you deplatformed. But being able to have those interactions was just as valuable as the medical teams that we had.
Right.
It was just absolutely incredible, the outreach that comes with it. When even when you're having kind of what you think is a great day. Sometimes, just knowing that you're not alone on an island, and especially in the world of COVID where we're kind of cabin fever and isolated already, it's really important for people to trust others.
I didn't even think of that, when you were saying that, and the correlation of how we were all going through quarantine, even though I said it out loud, about your dad, like, not having to sacrifice all those things, But at least he knew more than half the world was doing it at the same time, which is very, very sad. But thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to wrap up my show. Again, obviously, this is close to my heart. being that it's my godfather's family and my godmother. I mean, like he said, it has to take a small army of people, and God bless that woman. You know,
she was stuck with him 24/7.
Yeah. I didn't say it like that, Dale.
I didn't say it was a bad
I'm
thing.
trying to give her props, not talking about how he can be. You know, she's anytime anybody says her name, they just talk about how amazing she is, and she really is. Even growing up as a child, she, you know, always sent me chocolates, homemade crafts, never missed a holiday, never missed a birthday, always got the card.
She's our silent hero in all of this.
Yeah, and my mom loves her dearly too. You know, my mom didn't speak really good English, but they laughed a lot. What about her? I think they still do the same thing, but anyway. The power of... Anyway, again, there's Be the Match. It's an easy little swab in your mouth. I mean, that's not a lot of effort.
And it's free.
It's free, and you never know. It could be, like he said, it could be a kid in Germany. It could be somebody in your backyard. You never know. Hear about those beautiful stories. Be part of a beautiful story. Save somebody's life. Be the match. And there are so many people to thank, you know, during this journey. Like I said, I'm so happy that I got to do this. I wasn't sure what my show was going to be about because I didn't want to announce it until I, you know, physically spoke to them in person. Next week, I'm going to be doing a cooking show. I'll be with my mom, hopefully, through video. We'll see what happens. If not, I'll still be cooking regardless. We also have, like I said, the mental health counselor that's going to come on and talk about depression and anxiety. We'll define what it is. We'll define what kind of therapy you can get or what kind of medications, not specifics, but just avenues. To make a change, like I said, is always difficult for somebody. To accept help can be difficult for others. But, you know, after this whole year that we have lived and being told what to do, you know, that's why those people are put there. That's why they're given the powers. But it's up to us to choose what kind of life we want to live, you know, and like we were saying, like at the end of the day, what is your quality of life? What is the grand scheme of your life? What sense of purpose do you have? Are you just okay with what you have, or do you want more? You know, this is something that a lot of people need to do at this time. You know, so many people are wallowing with depression. Our young adults are suffering, a large percent of them. And I'll get more into that. Like I said, so we have coming up mental health. We have a dance studio coming up. I'm going to do St. Patty's Day with Irish food with an Asian twist.
I think you need to do a karaoke night.
Okay, yeah, no. And yeah, we have a lot of shows. I'm booked all the way through April. Thank you so much, everybody, for your support. Make sure you share. Sharing is caring. We need a lot of people. We need a lot of Be the matches. Yeah. That sound right? Is that correct? Okay, whatever. Everyone's got my point. Thank you so much again for watching the Mary Show. Thank you, Dale.
Thank you.
And God bless that my godfather's still here. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, so that's that.